would go with me to 1 Kings chapter 17. 1 Kings chapter 17. We got a little bit of reading to do, verses 1 through 16. 1 Kings 17, 1 through 16. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. It says, "Now Elijah, who was from Tishbe in Gilead, told King Ahab, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, the God I serve, there will be no dew or rain during the next few years until I give the word. Then the Lord said to Elijah, go to the east and hide by Kerith Brook, near where it enters the Jordan River. Drink from the brook and eat what the ravens bring you, for I have commanded them to bring you food." So Elijah did as the Lord told him and camped beside Kerith Brook, east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat each morning and evening, and he drank from the brook. Verse 7, "But after a while the brook dried up, for there was no rainfall anywhere in the land. Then the Lord said to Elijah, go and live in the village of Zarephath, near the city of Sidon. I have instructed a widow there to feed you." So he went to Zarephath. As he arrived at the gates of the village, he saw a widow gathering sticks. And he asked her, "Would you bring me a little water in a cup?" As she was going to get it, he called to her, "Bring me a bite of bread too." But she said, "I swear by the Lord your God that I don't have a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour left in the jar and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die." But Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you said, but make a little bread for me first. Then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son." Verse 14, "For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again." So she did as Elijah said, and she and Elijah and her family continued to eat for many days. There was always enough flour and olive oil left in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. So the background of this text is one that we've heard about kind of often. It has been preached from extensively. Elijah was God's prophet at the time who was being used to reestablish God's significance in the eyes of Ahab, of Jezebel, and the people in the land who served Baal and a bunch of other gods.
Yes, yes.
And before God sent Elijah to Zarephath, Elijah had told Ahab, there's not going to be any rain for the next few years until I give the word. This is what Elijah had said to the king. He was proving a point to him because the people served gods of rain and gods of this and gods of that. And so Elijah's job was to get the people to understand the significance of God. So before God sent Elijah to Zarephath, he was sitting, he told him, go to this brook. And when you're there, some ravens are going to feed you. Drink from this brook. Do this. So before he went to where the widow was, he was being fed by a bird that was known to be dirty, and he was drinking water out of a brook. Okay? He was drinking there until it dried up. And this morning, what I want to speak to us about, God gave me the title 2 weeks ago before I knew anything about it, knew where I was coming from or anything. The title this morning is The Lack of Luxury. Not the lap of luxury as most of the time that we hear the phrase, but the lack, L-A-C-K, of luxury. Lack is defined as to be deficient or missing, to be short of or have need of something. Luxury is a condition of abundance or great ease and comfort, something adding to pleasure or comfort but not absolutely necessary, an indulgence in something that provides pleasure, satisfaction, or ease. And often when this text is used, the focus is on the miracle that God performed for the widow. And don't get me wrong, that's important and that's wonderful, but today what God wants us to focus our attention on is what happened during this period of lack of luxury in this widow's life, in Elijah's life, and what happens in ours? How will we be able to identify ourselves in this narrative and see how to improve our outcome? The first point to note in this lesson is there is no lack. Now, I know I said the title of the message is The Lack of Luxury, but understand, given the definitions that I provided at the beginning, that the first point we need to understand is there is no lack. Psalm 34:9 says, "Fear the Lord, you his holy people, for those who fear him lack nothing." For those who fear him lack nothing. So how many times are we concerned with the luxuries that we don't have? Remember, luxury is defined as a condition of abundance or great ease and comfort. Something that is not absolutely necessary.
Right.
So if we're lacking something, could it be that it's because we aren't fearing the Lord? Because what we just read, Psalms 34:9 says, "Fear the Lord, you his holy people, for those who fear him lack nothing." So if there is seriously a lack, meaning a shortage of something, we're without something, could it be because we don't fear the Lord? The only thing that Elijah was lacking, remember, he was being fed by birds and he was drinking water. So he was being sustained. The only thing that he lacked was the luxury to pick what he wanted. The only thing he lacked was the luxury of how it was served to him. The only thing he lacked was the ability to go anywhere else because God sent him to where he was. So at that moment, his only lack was, I'm eating from birds and I'm drinking from the brook. But he was taken care of. Second point, as a caveat to that first one, we often mislabel a luxury as a need. Sometimes we complain to God that we don't have what we need when that isn't really true, because God's word is true and he will provide all of our needs according to his riches and glory. Sometimes we label a luxury a need. And then we blame God because we don't have it. We want a certain type of job. We want a certain place to live in. We want a certain pair of shoes. We want a certain type of situation. And because we don't have that yet, we label that as a need. And we tell God, you aren't meeting my need. We have to remember that there's a difference between a need and a luxury.
That's right.
There's a difference between a need and a luxury. Do we think that Elijah would have rather eaten something off of a plate and something not brought to him by the filthiest birds that there are, that he would have rather someone pour him some water? Yes, but was he hungry? No. Was he dehydrated? No. He did not have a need. He lacked luxury. The widow at Zarephath was without luxury. She didn't have no extra. She didn't have the luxury on relying on anyone else because her husband was dead. Everything fell to her to take care of. Her son was her sole responsibility. Insert here, there won't always be company or companionship on your journey with God. That's a luxury. That's a luxury. We won't always have somebody propping us up and telling us you can do it. At a certain point, we've grown up in God enough where we're going to have to strike out on our own. We're going to have to take this thing forward for us. Our relationship with God, our individual situation with him is going to have to be prevalent enough that we understand I may not have any friends doing this with me. I might not have nobody, no homies. I may not have no homegirls that I can call and say, you can do it. Keep going. This might be a situation where I'm lacking in friends. I'm lacking in camaraderie. And it could be, the luxury of that could be that I'm learning to trust in God.
Right. Wow.
Point number 2. God uses whatever means he pleases to provide for his people.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Now, this blew my mind when God showed this to me. God would provide for Elijah through a woman. Women in Israel had a higher position and status than those of their Gentile neighbors, and that this was highly irregular, though, that God would choose a woman to provide for a man. Because we know God's order is that the man takes care of. But God sent his prophet to a woman with a lack.
Mm.
Wow.
Second, this was a Gentile woman. She wasn't even a fellow believer with Elijah. She was outside of the circle of God's own people. In fact, she was from the pagan nation of the Sidonians or Phoenicians, who at that time represented the forces united against God's kingdom. She was an enemy, just off nationality. Third, she was poor, depressed, and a widow facing starvation.
Wow.
She wasn't exactly the kind of person you would think to go to for support. But she was the person who God had chosen to be Elijah's support and the instrument of God's glory.
Yes, yes.
Catch this. Elijah didn't know her plight. God said, get up, go to Zarephath. I have commanded a widow to feed you. Elijah gets up and goes. God didn't give Elijah the intel that the woman was a widow, that she was about to cook her, and we know God knows this, that she was going to prepare her last meal, her and her son were going to eat it and die. Elijah didn't know that. Why do we think that maybe God didn't tell him? Could it be because the same reason he don't tell us stuff? Because if he give us too much, we ain't going to do it. Because if he let us know you have to go to this poor woman, imagine being a prophet of God and God tell you that you're going to go tell a woman who's about to, she's a widow, one, she's technically your enemy, two, and she don't have anything. She doesn't have, she's about to cook the little bit that she has, and she's planning for her and her son to die.
Yes.
God doesn't tell us what we don't need to know. It is not pertinent to our journey to know all of the ins and outs. However God decides to give us what he's going to give us, i.e. the story that I told you all before about how God blessed this week in a way that I was trying to make wait until today. We don't have the luxury to tell God when and how and who to use.
Amen.
See, this is some of our problem. We get into God's business.
Yes.
And this is why he can't tell us much. He just tell us go do that. Because if he tells us how, we'll be like, well, God, you know what, it would be better, don't bother the Julians. How about you ask Brittany, because she don't have no kids, and we get to trying to tell God how to handle his business.
That's right.
This is some of the reason why he can't tell us nothing. The lack of our knowledge is actually a luxury for us because it keeps us from getting out of the will of God and into his way.
Amen.
We second guess God and we try to tell him what we think is best. What business is it of ours anyway? Why do we care how he blesses us? Why do we care who he uses? God, because she don't like me, and if she come over here giving me something, I don't really trust nothing. I'm going to have to pray over it real hard, and I'm going to have to, she look at me funny, so I don't really want no blessing from her. Really? If she's the one with the blessing, we going to tell God, because I don't like her, or I know she don't like me, don't use her to bless me. The audacity that we take with God of telling him how we might want him to do something. That's why he can't tell us nothing. Point 3, ask God for the vision needed to see the opportunity for ministry lying right under our nose. The widow only saw her current situation. She didn't have the luxury of offering anybody else any food. She had enough for her son and her, she said. She couldn't see how it was possible that she could give him food first. When he said, give me a piece of bread, she said, I swear on your God that I don't have it, sir. I'm gathering these sticks. I'm going to take this flour and this oil. Me and my boy are going to eat, and we're going to die. I don't have any bread to give you. And then it would appear that Elijah was a little insensitive to her response. In verse 8 he says, in verse 13 he says, don't be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you said. But make a little bread for me first. Yeah, I heard you say you was going to cook the food for you and your boy, y'all going to die. Go ahead and do that. But before you do that, bring me some bread first. Imagine if she had gotten an attitude and didn't hear the rest of what he said. Because right after that he said, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, there will always be flour and oil. But what if mid-prophecy, what if mid-instruction, the way we do when we get our back up when God is talking to us, we don't hear the rest of what he said because we ain't like what he said before. What you mean? Go ahead and do that, but bring you something first. I don't even know you. Who are you coming in here asking me to give you my son's last meal? I don't know you. What if she had taken that attitude? Somehow, I don't believe her blessing would have been the same. Her obedience secured her blessing.
Yes.
She heard him all the way out. And she decided, I'm going to listen. Now, let's look at it from Elijah's point of view. Remember when Elijah was sitting at the brook minding his own business till the brook dried up and God said, get up and go here. I have already commanded a woman to feed you.
Yes.
It seemed like, if it, from Elijah's standpoint, was she telling me what she ain't got? Well, Lord, I thought you had said you commanded. Seemed to me like she don't know that I was coming, because she's saying she doesn't have what you're saying that I need. Why is it that it's hard for us to stand on what God has said when we're met with opposition?
Yes.
Elijah just said, I heard what you said, but go make me this bread first. See, he didn't waver from what God had said. God told Elijah that this woman was going to feed him. That's all Elijah stood by. He didn't come up with reasons and try to figure out, well, God, this must not be, and ask her a bunch of questions and get into, well, praying again. No, he heard God the first time, and he just told her, okay, go do what you said, but first, do what God told me you were going to do. Let us take a note from Elijah and understand that it's not for us to get in the weeds of how that person is going to do what God said. That is on that person. We just need to stand on the word that God has given us. Let them figure out how they're going to obey God. Let them figure out the truth of how they're going to, whether they're going to accept what God has given us. Don't take down from what God has said to you. Yes. Elijah stood there and said, okay, I hear you.
Yes.
But give me mine first, then you take care of your son. He told her, don't be afraid. And she obeyed. What did she have to lose? If what God said didn't come to pass, which we know is impossible, she still was going to die hungry, right? She was going to die of starvation. Either the last meal she had before Elijah came would have been it, or the one that she was preparing. She was going to die of starvation. Let her tell it. So what did she have to lose? Sometimes we feel like we have such a luxury of time. We don't have the luxury of time.
That's true.
When God gives us something to obey, we need to obey it at the time that he says it. What if she decided that, no, I'm not going to give it to you? She would have been disobedient. She wouldn't have gotten what she got, and she would have died anyway. When God speaks, just obey. Let's not wonder and sit and try and figure out how it's going to affect us and how it's going to work out and when and put the next puzzle pieces together. We trying to get down four steps down ahead of God, and we haven't done the first thing he told us.
Right.
That's
We
right.
don't have that luxury.
Help us, God.
We don't always have the luxury of a do-over. The widow had one last. One last. She didn't have two last. She had one last meal. What if when God tells us something, we have that one opportunity to get it right?
Yes.
We don't know if we've skated so far on God's grace and mercy that he said, this is the last one for Kim.
Oh, God.
And if she don't get it this time, she just ain't gonna have it.
Yeah.
Do we understand that there are things that we could have had in God that we probably have missed for our disobedience, that we may not get a second try back around at? Do we think that? No, we don't think that way. We think God's mercy and his grace is always there, and he's always going to give me the second opportunity to get this specific thing that I passed up before. No, not necessarily. Give God what he's asking for when he asks. Give him our best, and that's it. She had one last. The widow had one last. And she had to give it. Point 4. Some of us will forego our blessing because it isn't all in one piece. It's in stages. Well, God will answer the immediate need, and we're already disappointed because he didn't mention how to handle stage 2. God promised that her flour and oil would run out during the drought, not forever. See, and we'll get upset with God because you didn't promise me forever. You said that this would work until this time. The word from God said, there will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again. You mean to tell me you're going to bless me while I can't do anything because nothing's growing, you're going to bless me through that, but then you're going to stop and then I'm going to have to work for it? Yes. Yes. That's our reasonable service. We want God to do all of it. See, when it's convenient for us. We don't want him to do all of it when it's taking our will and subjecting ourselves to him and being obedient. We don't want him to take that all at once. We want him to take little baby steps for that, Lord. You see my heart, and you know I put that down, God. Now don't come after me for this other stuff yet, Lord. Wait a minute. Let me get acclimated. I had stopped cussing. Don't tell me to quit lying to me. Now wait. Let me get acclimated because that's hard. Now I'm not going to cuss, but this lying, wait, God, let me get used to it. See, we want him to be